course of the meeting any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains quorate, it will continue. It will be deemed that that member with connection issues has left the meeting and will no longer be able to participate. If it is my connection that goes, then the Vice Chairman will assume control of the meeting. For all officers and speakers, will you please ensure that your microphones and cameras are switched off, and I will call you to speak at appropriate times. For committee members, can you please make sure that your microphones and cameras are switched off unless you are speaking? If you wish to ask a question on the officer's report or during the debate, please use the raise hand function and wait for me to speak. And can I remind everybody that you should have blurred your backgrounds on your screens and that we do not use the chat function during the meeting. Voting during virtual meetings will be raise hand function. Does anybody have any questions before we move to the formal agenda? I will now ask our Democratic Service Officer to confirm the attendees at the meeting. Your name will be called out. Can you please confirm your attendance by saying present? Claire.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mrs Brown.
Of the meeting, any member of the committee is having connection issues, then there will be a short adjournment of up to 5 minutes to determine whether the connection issues can be resolved. If following the adjournment the connection issues cannot be resolved, then providing the meeting remains
I can just present it, so you don't share it.
Okay. Just give me 1 second to open it up. Right, as I said, this is land north of Squires Road, Stretton-on-Dunsmore. The scope of the application is the site is in the northern part of Stretton-on-Dunsmore, a main rural settlement. The site contributes to borough-wide housing provision and is part of the 5-year supply. Access is via Squires Road, and the site is allocated for housing in the local plan for around 50 units. There is a plan showing DS 3.9 in the top of the screen. Moving on to the next slide, the site features show an agricultural field. There are very little features in the middle of the site other than on the northern boundaries and the eastern boundaries there are mature hedgerows. There is one oak tree on the eastern boundary, and the western boundary is characterised by a laurel hedge. Moving on to site photos. Site photos show the top photo on the first slide of the site photos shows the top of Squires Road where the proposed access is. The other photos on that slide shows the eastern hedgerow, and you can see some trees have grown out from the hedgerow, and also you can see the oak standard on the eastern hedgerow. The next slide shows various views of, for example, the pond in the southeast corner of the site, views eastward across the site. The laurel hedge along the western boundary is visible in the bottom photograph. And again, there is another eastern boundary photo showing the mature oak tree. For this scheme, the key issues are strategic housing provision, landscape and biodiversity, transport, flooding and Section 106 issues. And as mentioned earlier, this principle of development has been established by the residential allocation in the local plan. Next slide is the original scheme proposed 67 houses with an indicative layout, but this was submitted prior to the local plan being adopted. It did not take into account the inspector's requirement for landscaping along the western and northern boundaries to define the green belt edge. Further indicative layouts at 60 failed to incorporate adequate landscaping. The indicative layouts suggest that 67 or 60 units could not be provided on the site, whilst also incorporating landscaping. And the next slide shows the original indicative layouts, just as an illustration, because they have now been withdrawn. The amended plan shows 7-metre wide landscaping strips along the western and northern boundaries to the site to define the green belt edge. The western boundary landscaping straddles the red line boundary of the application. This was to ensure the developable area inside the landscaping is large enough. Legal advised that this can be delivered via a Section 106 agreement. This is considered to be the minimum landscaping which could be provided to meet the requirements of the inspector. But it could be supplemented by a biodiversity offsetting payment to increase the landscaping west of the red line boundary. The proposals also include a 3-metre landscaping strip along the eastern boundary and a 6-metre landscaping strip along the southern boundary. The next slide shows an overview of the structural landscaping. So the idea of this is to act as a structure, and the inside of this area is where development would take place. If we needed, the next 3 slides are showing the landscaping plans in slightly more detail. They can just be flicked through quite quickly and they can aid discussions subsequently. So in terms of landscaping and biodiversity, Warwickshire County Council Ecology recommended a landscape and ecological management plan secured by condition and section 106 to increase the biodiversity value of the structural landscaping. This is to include native planting, protected species enhancement features, including a hedgehog highway scheme and newt mitigation. The conditions reinforce the LEMP and include the need for a tree survey, a construction management plan, and also remove permitted development rights for fencing along the front of properties. The section 106 also would set a payment structure for biodiversity offsetting, which can be amended according to the amount of biodiversity net gain in the reserve matters layout. So the more they provide in the layout, the lower the biodiversity offsetting payment would be. Subject to these requirements, the impact on biodiversity and landscaping is considered acceptable. Another key issue is transport, highways and parking. Many objectors cited transport as an issue. The previous refusal of planning permission in 2013, however, did not include transport as a reason for refusal, nor were transport issues given as a reason not to allocate the site. Now, as part of this application, modelling for the proposal has been assessed for 67 houses without there being a significant highways impact. TC, which is automatic traffic counts, were also undertaken to inform trip rate assumptions for the transport assessment. A sensitivity test took into account development growth in the vicinity, including Plot Lane, and future growth, which also demonstrated no significant impact. In addition, a junction analysis found significant spare capacity at the junction, and the Highway Authority raised no objection on highway safety grounds. Paragraph 109 of the NPPF advises refusal only on severe impact or residential cumulative effects. Neither apply in this case. Many objectors did not like the environment around the site access and the changes that will occur, particularly the junction with Roberts Close, which would be required to be made into a more formal arrangement by the Highways Authority. This was as a result of a road safety audit, which is required on schemes and is considered to be needed generally, but also in view of proximity to the school. The details of traffic calming in this particular area, as well as how the site integrates with the public right-of-way which runs through the site along the south, is suggested to be controlled by condition. Car and cycle parking can be provided in accordance with council standards at the reserve matters stage, and the section 106 provides improvements to public rights of way, bus stops, and providing sustainable travel packs. Another issue that was strongly held by residents was flooding. Many objections were made on flooding grounds, especially in relation to Squires Road, Roberts Close and Plot Lane. How flooding is dealt with is dependent on the detailed layout. The local lead flood authority objected to the previous layouts, but raises no objection to the landscape strategy plan, as it is evident that an acceptable scheme can be designed at the detailed matters stage. So conditions 17 and 18 relate to the need to submit a revised surface water drainage scheme and management plan to comply with policy. In terms of housing numbers, policy H1 sets out target housing mix, which can be considered to be controlled by condition 5. Whilst indicative layouts suggested the site could not accommodate 67 or 67 houses, in response to objections, it is proposed that a cap of no more than 55 houses is suggested in condition 5, in addition to the housing mix. It's considered this provides a balance between making good use of the land, is close to the allocation number, and allows for housing to be located within the structural landscaping. From the start, the proposal as proposed 30% affordable housing, which is policy compliant. The housing officer requested affordable units to be in the form of a discounted market sale in perpetuity. and it's considered that these details can be secured through a Section 106 agreement. And also condition 5 is requested to also conform with the affordable housing mix in line with policy. In terms of Section 106 matters, as well as the affordable housing, the NHS Trust requested contributions towards healthcare services, an education contribution towards school places, bus stop enhancements were required, as I said before, from highways. The Public Rights of Way team requested upgrades to surrounding public rights of way in the vicinity and towards School Lane to access the bus stops. This site would require an open space contribution with the monies given to the parish council to spend in the locality. The LEMP and the biodiversity offsetting payment is also considered to be achievable through the Section 106 agreement, and it could also allow for additional landscaping to the west of the red line to be provided in perpetuity. Other issues that arose, as well as the open space, it is considered that conditions in Section 106 can also control air quality, archaeology, water usage and sustainable buildings, broadband infrastructure and fire and rescue. So in the planning balance, it is considered that the proposal makes a strategic contribution to housing provision across the borough, provide economic benefits through construction activity and future spend of residents, provide a suitable greenbelt edge via structural landscaping, which would also not affect amenity of surrounding properties. The LEMP and the biodiversity offsetting payment will create a net gain in biodiversity. It is not considered that there will be a severe impact on highway safety or the network. The public right of way will be maintained. There will not be a severe impact on flooding. These factors weigh in favour of the proposals, and therefore the development is considered compliant with the local plan and the MPPF. And the officer recommendation is for approval subject to Section 106 and conditions.
Thank you very much, Maxine. A bit off-putting when the technology doesn't work at the start of your presentation, but thank you, Richard. We managed to get through that one okay. So does any member of the committee have any question of clarification for Maxine? Right, the first hand I've got up is Councillor Eccleston.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, question for the officer, please. Maxine, you mentioned a couple of times in your presentation about traffic impact. You mentioned two terms. You said significant and severe. Are there actually figures available that actually tells us what the difference is between significant and severe within traffic impact?
Well, the best in relation to this scheme, one of the things that measures severe traffic impact is junction capacity. And in this case, a severe impact is where you reach functional capacity, and that's measured by a RFC ratio. And for it to be a severe, it needs to be 0.8. That's the unit of measurement. In this case, even with all the development in the future, plot lane, and assuming 67 houses, the junction capacity is 0.1. So it's effectively, that is effectively almost like an 89% spare capacity before it goes into the severe category.
Thank you very much. Okay, hope that answers your question. Councillor Sanderson, you're next. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 3 points to raise with the officer. Again, like Councillor Eccleston, I have concerns regarding traffic movements and the very low figures that the county has sent back to us, particularly as we're talking 3, 4 and 4+ sized housing units on 35 plus% of the site. Now, the average cost for that size of dwelling is around, in the Midlands, is £402,000.
Councillor Sanderson, can
No,
I
hang on,
remind you,
let
it
me
should
finish
be
my
a
point.
question,
Listen.
not a long speech.
Listen to my point, Catherine, and you'll understand.
No, question, please, otherwise I'll move
The
you.
question is, will houses of that size and price range require dual earner occupiers with 2 or more cars?
Okay, Maxine?
Well, the size of the houses, it was done 3 or 4 times the actual traffic counts. They did traffic counts of the area, they did sensitivity tests, they did a junction analysis, and there's specific highway specifications as to how traffic is assessed according to highway engineers' guidelines. And all of that was done in accordance with normal guidelines, comparing it with similar developments that have occurred. They refer to something called a TRIX database, where they survey nationally very similar size developments in order to look at trip rates from the size of developments. Now, the highways interrogated the transport assessment that was submitted as part of this scheme because they wanted very specific transport movements in relation to Squires Road, which they did. So all I can say is it was done in accordance with normal transport modelling guidelines. There was a sensitivity test, there was junction analysis, and the information that's fed back to us from highways was it is not near an impact that they can recommend a highways refusal, which then makes me as an officer have to consider paragraph 109 of the NPPF, which says that refusal should only occur if it's a severe impact. So, for example, if the junction analysis had come back and said, right, we are at 0.75, we're at 0.85, that's the situation where you say, right, this will result in significant queuing and delays, and none of the various tests that they did resulted in the capacity being suggested to be severe.
Right,
Yeah.
thank you. I think we've had a very full explanation there about traffic and traffic movements and traffic numbers.
My second point, Chair, was
Question, please.
It is a question.
Thank you.
It's on the. Wish we could get our relationship sorted out a little better. It would be helpful.
You know the rules, Councillor.
It would be helpful. It includes the buffer zone. Now, as you may be aware, in our emerging SPD southwest location, the Natural England are recommending buffer zones of 15 metres. In this report, you're recommending a buffer zone of only 3 metres. Is this not likely to cause confusion on other sites within that locality if we go for such a low buffer zone on this site?
Thank you. Maxine?
Yeah, right. In relation to buffer zones for the southwest, the buffer zone around Corston Spinney is suggested to be 15 metres because that equates to advice in relation to ancient woodland. That is mainly in relation to root protection areas, and because ancient woodland has the highest level of protection in terms of trees. Now, in this situation, there are 2 areas of landscape areas which are mature in terms of the northern boundary and the eastern boundary. Now, the reason why we said 7 metres is there's no ancient woodland in relation to this site. It's mainly a farmer's field that has mature hedgerow on 2 sides. The inspector required a green belt edge in relation to the western and the northern boundaries, and the width of the buffers on those are 7 metres. The width of the buffers relate to trying to get a decent landscaping edge to define the intersection between the village, where the village ends and where the green belt starts.
Thank you, Maxine. I need to bring my legal advisor in, please.
Okay.
Thank you. Just to reiterate the point that Maxine made at the start, just for members' benefit, the Natural England advice in relation to a 15-metre buffer only relates to ancient woodland. So in the absence of ancient woodland on this site, that guidance from Natural England is not relevant. And the size of the buffer, as indicated by the inspector as being needed, is left to the discretion of the decision makers and the planning officers. Maxine can explain how she came to the 7-metre position.
Right, okay, fine. Right, can we have a concise answer, please, Maxine?
It was just a matter of planning judgment. 7 metres was substantial enough for a substantial buffer, and it was just how it was negotiated.
Thank you. Did you have a third question, Councillor Sanderson?
My third question was on the biodiversity loss that's been indicated in the report from this arable field. If we did have a more extensive buffer zone, would we not ensure that we did get biodiversity gain?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, the main biodiversity value elements are the northern and the eastern boundaries, which contain the hedgerow. The centre of the site is fairly devoid of biodiversity. There is grassland there, and it's uncultivated, but it's been cultivated in the past, so it will have residual pesticides in it. Increasing the width of those structural landscapings, if you ensure you have a landscape and ecological management plan, that will increase the net gain, because you will fill it with things like native species and newt mitigation materials and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on, Councillor Garcia, you're being very patient. You're next.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. It's just for my own clarification, actually. Maxine, why is it, or is it because in the local plan it says that site's designated for 50 houses, yet you've put here 55? Is that just to give the builder a bit of leeway?
It is, again, it's a judgment call that it was evident that 60 and 67 are you're not going to be able to fit biodiversity landscaping on there. I couldn't say for sure that 55 couldn't be fitted on there. So it is to allow for development to be maximised on site while still maintaining the landscaping.
Okay.
Sorry, I think you've missed my point a little bit. Why in the local plan does it say 50 then, and you've plumped for 55?
In the local plan, it was specifically changed to around 50. So it's the upper limit of around 50.
Okay, so that's a 10% increase on 50, basically.
Yeah. And how do you ensure that you've put 30% affordable housing here? How do you ensure that stays as 30%?
The Section 106 agreement will ensure also the type of affordable housing is a discount from market sale. As I understand it, legal may be able to clarify, they tend to be easier to deliver on site rather than looking for a registered landlord.
Okay, Sarah, would you like to come in? And Councillor Sanderson, you still got your camera on.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to Councillor Garcia's point, it will be secured by Section 106 agreement. That, like any affordable housing provision, will always be subject to viability arguments, as that's an operation of national policy and law, which we can't do anything about. But as Maxine says, discount market housing is generally more attractive to be delivered on site. So I don't envisage a reduction in that 30% in a site of this nature for that type of affordable housing.
Okay. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Right. Councillor Shrivastava, you're next.
Thank you very much. My question is on comment on page 23, the lack of objection from the local lead flood authority. What happened? Why we didn't get the response?
Oh, We did get the response, councillor. We've had
Sorry, it says lack of response, it says on page 23.
Yeah, that's possibly rephrased inaccurately. We've had various objections along the way from the local lead flood authority. They objected to earlier indicative layouts. Now that we have the landscaping plan that frames the landscaping area, they provided enough information at the outline stage to demonstrate that a scheme would be possible of being delivered at the reserve matters stage. It's partially down to needing to see the details, and they need to design the flood risk strategy alongside the details. So that's controlled by conditions 17 and 18.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Gillius.
Yes, Chair, it's regarding the landscaping. Although it does mention in the conditions about maintenance of the landscaping and border, I would be interested to know who would be doing that and how long would they be doing it for, and who were those folks that living in the dwellings? Would they be those that trigger that maintenance, i.e. after trees get overwhelming their properties or likely to fall into their properties?
Okay, the landscape and ecological management plan will require a management company or equivalent to manage the area. The whole idea of the structural landscaping is that it isn't in people's gardens, so that it's kept in perpetuity.
Absolutely fine. Right, your 3 minutes. Are you ready? And I'm timing you. Your 3 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for your indulgence. This evening I represent the parish of Stretton-on-Dunsmore, and we wish to speak out against the application as it stands. Not against the principle of development, which is now accepted, but against the subtle continual creep and the size of the proposal. You'll see from the report which officers have prepared that there's been some debate about the boundary of the site, and the Greenbelt release was finally made with the application site some 18 metres wider than anticipated. That equates to about 3,000 square metres of site. Our position, therefore, is simple. We believe that there is sufficient area within the site to accommodate the development of 50 properties as the local plan has identified. It isn't necessary or desirable to extend associated features beyond the site. If the committee is minded to approve the application, we invite you to add a condition to the approval such that all aspects of the development, including any boundary treatment, any screening or buffer zone, lie wholly within the site boundary, i.e. within the red line. We don't feel this is an unreasonable request, but it would leave the parish council content. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Does anybody on the committee have a question for Mr. Gordon? No? Councillor Gillius.
Chair, just to ask Mr. Gordon whether he has any concerns about traffic movement.
We do, both as a parish council and on behalf of residents who've raised concerns. And as the officer will have explained, the calculations that might be done or the measurements might be taken in terms of junction capacity seem to indicate that there aren't any concerns at all. The concerns which the village raised, though, are beyond that junction. So as vehicles come down to the main junction on Plot Lane and turn left or right, their dispersal through the road network is then much more constrained. So if you turn right, it's a single carriageway road with a few passing places. If you turn left, you're limited by School Lane, which is then A45 west only. Or if you want to travel south or east, you then need to negotiate the centre of the village and also Brookside, which are effectively single carriageway. So unfortunately, the planning process doesn't really allow for that more than an observation. The junction calculations don't show it. There have also been concerns in terms of the junction with Roberts Close. So this is close to the entrance to the site, from residents in the area who are concerned about effectively traffic speeding down Squires Road, but the additional traffic in what is currently a cul-de-sac.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in terms of these traffic movements, is the overall traffic movements, I know that Dunchurch, like the Dorothy system, is one of our air quality black spots.
Sarah was wanting to clarify something.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pickett. Just a word of caution to members to ensure they don't take into consideration matters that haven't been evidenced or considered appropriately. So traffic movements that haven't been dealt with in the officer's report or looked at by Warwickshire County Council, just a word of caution before you factor those into your deliberation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Picker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your comments, Mr. Gordon. I just wanted to clarify for my own sort of mind. My reading of the report and the presentation of the officer is that the only incursion beyond the red line shown on the boundary of the site will be the improved biodiversity from removing the laurel hedge and putting in the buffer zone. So are you saying that all of that should be within the red line boundary in the parish council's view?
It's our request, certainly, that the buffer zone is substantial, and we would leave that to the relevant authorities to decide what substantial was, but that it should be all contained within the site, within the red line. At the moment, it's suggested that straddle the red line and straddle the existing hedge line that's there. That doesn't seem entirely appropriate as a boundary. There is obviously the concern that might creep over time to be increasingly in the field to the west and less of it inside the boundary. So if the outer edge is constrained by the boundary, there is a distinct line upon which everyone can work.
Okay, thank you. Right, if there are no further questions for Mr. Gordon, thank you very much, Mr. Gordon, for your presentation, and we'll move on now to Mr. Middleton. So, Mr. Middleton, are you with us?
Good evening. Good evening.
Okay, and your 3 minutes begins now.
Okay, I won't get bogged down too much in the detail of what's already been discussed, particularly through Maxine's presentation. But at the outset, I would urge members to be mindful of the fact that this application is in outline, and the only thing that isn't reserved for determination at a later stage is that of access. So they're the two issues that we're dealing with in terms of principle and whether the access is acceptable or not. We've looked at things like the boundary of the site, the landscaping, etc. I mean, this application has been with the local authority for 2 years, which it's been the subject of extensive public consultation. But before that, it was also widely consulted on during the process to produce and adopt the new local plan, which allocates it for development. Now, the site is allocated through DS3 for around 50 dwellings. The 50 doesn't serve as a cap. It serves as a guiding figure to ensure that the site delivers to achieve the housing trajectory over the time of the plan. So I think restricting the site to 50 dwellings would be seen to go against boosting housing land supply within the borough. And furthermore, in terms of if we were to put the landscape buffer wholly within the site, it reduces the developable area. There then remains questions as to whether 50 could be delivered on site, which then increases housing pressure elsewhere in the district, whether that's alternative sites within Stretton itself or whether that's alternative sites elsewhere in the borough. That wouldn't be for us to identify at this stage. However, given the principal acceptability and the range of social, economic and environmental benefits which will be delivered, most notably in respect of affordable housing to meet the needs that exist locally, it is considered that this proposal is acceptable and completely in alignment with the policies from the development plan. So I think I would urge that members are mindful of the fact that it is outline in nature, it is an allocated site, and there have been no technical objections to the application. Subsequently, there is no technical reason to refuse this planning application. I think that's all I've got to add at this point in time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Middleton, for reminding everybody that it is an outline planning application and that there will be reserved matters if it should be approved. Right, does anybody have a question of clarification for Mr. Middleton? No? In that case, we move on to the ward councillor, Councillor Roberts. Are you there, Councillor Roberts?
I am, thank you, Chair.
Okay, right, and if you are ready, your 3 minutes starts now.
Good evening, councillors. It's not often that I request an audience with the planning committee, and having sat on the committee, I recognise the complexity of the decision making that you have to do tonight. You're about to make a decision that affects generations to come, and therefore it's imperative that you get it right. I fully support Streatham-on-Dunsmore Parish Council and know their chairman has made a number of points in his speech, and I trust you will take those into consideration when you make your decision. When Rugby adopted its local plan, the development was for 50 dwellings. However, the government inspector who inspected the plan changed the wording. This development would create around about 50 dwellings, but he did not specify exactly the figure or formula to explain roundabout. Let's consider what's meant by the phrase roundabout. For example, if a road had a speed limit of 50 miles an hour and you were driving at 60 miles an hour, is that around about 50 miles an hour, approximately 20% over the speed limit? Is this okay? Condition 5 of the planning officer recommends 55 dwellings as the figure approximately 10% higher. I'm suggesting that it should be lower. In fact, possibly even 50 dwellings. Your job tonight is to establish that figure. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to your results.
Thank you very much, Councillor Roberts. Does any member of the committee have a query for Councillor Roberts? Okay, and I think now, Councillor Roberts, you have to leave the meeting, so I'll wait for our legal advisor to confirm that you've left the meeting.
I thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm that Councillor Roberts has left the meeting.
Thank you. And Mr. Gordon and Mr. Middleton are allowed to stay in the meeting until we've actually had our vote. Before I move into debate, Sarah, can you just clarify, because I think we've had a little bit of sidetracking, particularly over traffic and traffic concerns. Can you just clarify for the committee members exactly what it is we are debating on at the moment?
Absolutely. As committee members are aware, we seek a wide range of consultation responses from statutory consultees who are considered the technical experts in various areas. In relation to transport and highways, that is Warwickshire County Council, and in the absence of any objection or comment from them, unless we have strong evidence to indicate a departure from the statutory consultee, there is little reason for officers to refuse on the basis of that matter which the statutory consultee has determined acceptable. So I would ask members to bear that in mind when considering this application and thinking about which way they might like to go with it. There is nothing from our technical in this case, and no other evidence has been offered to refute that technical consultee.
Thank you. Can you also advise, Mr. Gordon suggested an additional condition. Could you advise on the point that he made there, please?
Forgive me, Chair, could Mr. Middleton just remind me of the additional condition he was suggesting?
Sorry, I think it was Mr. Gordon, but
I'll
happily do
sorry,
that.
Mr. Gordon.
That's
Thank
okay.
you,
That's
thank
okay.
you, Mr. Gordon.
Not a problem. Our request, therefore, or our invitation to you is to add a condition to the approval such that all aspects of the development, the landscaping, the buffer zones, the boundary treatment, any screening and so on, are contained within the limits of the site. That is within the red line on Maxine's figures.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. That's very helpful. In relation to planning conditions, they can only relate to the red line itself. So that condition is almost superfluous in its essence. I think the more pertinent point would be the scope of the Section 106 agreement, which is capable of binding land outside of the red line, which is where any buffer that would straddle the boundary of the red line would be captured. So it would be where the members were minded to suggest that the Section 106 red line should mirror the planning application red line. But that's something that we can pick up in debate. And I think Richard has got a clarification there for me.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. It was just to confirm that with regard to obviously the planting of trees and hedgerows, you wouldn't need planning permission to actually do that. So that could occur outside the site. But obviously a question that I think was raised by Councillor Gillius was to ensure then who actually maintains that. Now, obviously the Section 106 could then, as Sarah has alluded, actually control matters beyond the red line and actually then maintain that additional landscaping outside the site.
Thank you very much. OK, right. So I think we're now ready to move into debate, and Councillor Picker, your hand was first in the air.
I mean, I was actually going to kick off with some sort of further discussion on where we end up with this red boundary. I'm looking at the 106 agreements as outlined in the report, and the bottom one is landscaping in accordance with the landscape strategy, including an additional 3 metres of landscaping provided west of the red line along the western boundary. So are we saying that if we remove that, that would prevent any further development beyond the red line that's been being discussed? Sarah?
Thank you, Councillor Picker. If we remove that, it wouldn't prevent anyone planting trees beyond the red line boundary, because that wouldn't require planning permission. So trees, bushes, grasses, plants could still be planted beyond the red line. What it would mean is that those possibly wouldn't be able to be maintained, or a maintenance obligation enforced against the landowner if it wasn't covered off in the Section 106 agreement.
Right.
Okay. Okay, happy with that, Councillor Picker?
Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Right. Councillor Cranham, we haven't heard from you tonight, so I'm going to go to you next before I go to the next people, please.
I think Councillor Sanderson was first before me, Chair, but I'm quite happy to go now if Neil's happy with that.
I've just said we haven't heard from you tonight, so perhaps.
Thank you, Chair. This site has been the subject of previous planning applications, and long-serving members of the planning committee will remember that we had a site visit there. At that stage, that planning application was turned down because it was designated greenbelt. Since then, our local plan has redesignated it. And at the last planning committee, we turned down a site because it was not designated. In all fairness, to be consistent, we should recommend approval for this one, and that's what I'm prepared to do.
Thank you. So you're going to move for approval. Thank you,
Yes,
Councillor Cranham. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to get some clarity on this boundary. Does the owner of the current site own the land next door on the other side of the red line, and can this council reasonably put in a condition that says that we can plant stuff on the other side of the hedgerow?
Yes, I can confirm he does own land on both sides of the hedgerow.
He does own it on both sides.
And would be willing to enter into that obligation that has been set out in the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Srivastava.
Thank you very much. My question is on modelling of the transport situation environment by Warwickshire County Council. Was there any consultation with the local input? I don't know whether there was a local input or not.
Councillor, I think Sarah has already clarified this traffic situation. Does Councillor Srivastava's question fall within what you said or outside it, Sarah, please?
It's a slightly different point, and it's not one that I personally know the answer to, but Richard or Maxine might be able to clarify whether Warwickshire County Council seek views from the wider public area when they're doing their modelling.
Okay, so could either Maxine or Richard please answer?
Yes, the modelling assumptions included a general growth in traffic and in the village as well, including Plot Lane. It looked at a wider area than the application site, yes.
But I think Councillor's question was, were the residents actually consulted?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were consulted as part of the planning application several times. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Brown, Councillor Kieran Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo the thoughts of Councillor Cranham in the fact that, you know, this application, although it has been contentious, that the recommendations have been made and some conditions have been set. So with that in mind, I'd like to second approval, please.
Thank you very much. Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, just I'd like to ask Sarah again, just going back to the Chair of the Parish Council's view on the boundary, Sarah, is that grounds for a proposal then with a condition? Just for clarity.
Thank you, Councillor Eccleston. Just to confirm, that condition would be essentially a relatively pointless exercise because conditions can only be applied to the red line boundary. You can't control land outside of the red line boundary, so we don't need that condition. Where the councillor's point would be picked up would be in the scope of the drafting of the Section 106 agreement and to what extent that affects land outside of the red line boundary.
Oh, thanks for that, Sarah. Thank you.
Councillor Picker.
Thank you again, Chair. I think I was of the mind of what Councillors Cranham and Councillor Kieran Brown have said, that ultimately there hasn't been anything suggested by any of the speakers for refusal of this application. It is compliant with the local plan. It'll provide affordable housing for local residents. I think we should approve it this evening. But I will be very interested to see where the reserved matters comes forward and see whether we can address some of the concerns that have been raised at that stage.
Thank you. Councillor Roodhouse.
Yes, Councillor Picker's touched upon the reserved matters. I'm concerned and still concerned about the amount of reserved matters within it, and I'd sort of like some legal clarification because we've sort of had this happen before, certainly around affordable housing and those particular elements of viability as well. So I could just have some clarity around the reserved matters would come back to committee.
Sarah?
We're going to defer that one to Richard as to how reserved matters are treated, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's 2 points there. With regard to reserved matters, then at the moment reserved matters would start off being delegated at officer level under our constitution. But obviously, you know, members, when the applications come in, can call reserved matters to committee to be determined if they feel that they want it to be heard by committee, or there are concerns that they feel committee need to hear before an application is considered. With regard to affordable housing, Sarah did mention earlier that whilst obviously have 30%, and that would also be the 106, national legislation laid down by the government does allow for elements to be considered under viability, but obviously at the moment we will ensure that as it's drafted, the 30% is what we would aim for as officers, but obviously national legislation does allow variations to that if viability does come into play.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Gillius.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think we've really got to be absolutely consistent with our decision making, and at the last planning meeting we were consistent, and where this land has been allocated for development, so it should be. But I think from what's already been said, I would like to think that development would occur within the red line. And also, the reserve matters situation has just arisen with the previous question, and that is something that concerns me greatly. But just to touch on the situation regarding the highways, I'm absolutely amazed that, you know, county highways have only just looked at one junction rather than the effect of what will be quite a significant increase in the population of the village. on other roads within the village, because that is also could be very important. But at previous meetings, we've raised serious issues regarding the siting of dwellings so they can maximise the use of the sun. We've also spoken as regarding capturing the natural resources such as rainwater capture for flushing toilets, etc. And we've also looked at the one that bothers most of us is appropriate and enough allocation for parking within the dwelling, not out on the road. And we've found that end-to-end parking on driveways is not very popular, so people end up parking on the street. Side-by-side parking is useful, but it doesn't clutter up the street. So whether or not we as councillors get to the point where we're discussing and making decisions on reserve matters, well, remains to be seen. But I do hope that all the things that I've just mentioned are taken into account, so that when houses are built, they're there for, just take us through into the 21st century with all the things that entails.
Well, I'm hoping that Mr. Middleton, if he is still with us, is listening to what you're saying and taking note of those comments, so that when the design and the reserve matters comes in, that we can perhaps see evidence of the points that you've raised. Councillor Garcia.
Yes, it was the reserve matters. Actually, I was just wanting to clarify, because I'm sure, as you all realise, I'm in total agreement with Councillor Gillies about the parking, and also now I really do have a bee in my bonnet about the affordable housing. So are we within our rights to ask that if that is dropped hugely, that it could come back to committee instead of it just being automatically delegated to the officers?
Richard and Sarah, can I have advice on that, please?
If a future developer is likely to challenge the viability on the affordable housing, and that is part of the reserve matter submission, then obviously that would be debated at that time, and obviously members then could potentially call that to committee. Obviously we aren't aware that this particular site is being questioned, and I would also say, well, obviously this is an allocated site in the local plan, so therefore, when the developers were putting the site forward for greenbelt release, they would have been aware of what the costings were. So in terms of viability, we as officers would want to try and work to see if we can achieve that 30% affordable housing. But it may be as part of reserve matters that viability may come into play, but obviously at this moment in time we don't know. But the 106 at the moment will be written on the basis that it will be 30%.
Thank you. I think, bearing in mind committee's concerns about the affordable housing and the parking, it might be a good idea if, when it does get to reserve matters, if there is going to be deviation from what we think, that it does come back to committee, so that committee can be assured that there is the correct percentage of affordable housing, and that the concerns that have been raised about green energy and parking are addressed. Right, who's next? Councillor Sanderson. Is that an old hand or is that a new?
No, it's a new hand. Yeah, I think this one's a bit of a judgment of Solomon call. I am concerned that it's growing a bit like Mopsy, from 47 dwellings to 67 dwellings. And around 50 is around 50. I have a leaning towards the officer's recommendation of 55 dwellings. In terms of the buffer zone, since the owner of the land owns the field next door, I can see no reason why the buffer zone shouldn't be at 7 metres, which picks up another point that the officer made. Disappointed again in the scheme that there's no cycle route provision identified within it. Perhaps the county council and officers don't want to see us modify our mode of transport and get car usage down.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Eccleston.
Yeah, being mindful of Sarah's comments on highways, but also taking on board what several of our councillors have said tonight, including latterly Councillor Gillius, about highways, and highways being my industry. And I'm very cynical and sceptical about the use of modelling tools in my industry, to be honest with you. And you don't need a degree in clever sums to figure out that 55 houses could be as many as 400 to 500 traffic movements a day in and around the village of Stretton-on-Dunsmore, which I think is a phenomenal impact on that village and the centre of that village. And I just want us to be mindful of that for the future, please.
Right, thank you. Right, we've had it moved for approval by Councillor Cranham and seconded by Councillor Kieran Brown. So I think we're probably now ready to move to a vote. So all those in favour, please raise your hands.
That's 9-4, Chair.
Thank you. Hands down. And then those, okay, those, we've still got one, those, Kieran Brown, you still got your hand up.
Yes, Chair, it's not actually allowing me to.
Right, I think it's gone. Right, those against, please please raise your hands. Okay, one against.
That's two against, Chair.
Two against, okay. And obviously that makes 11 no abstentions. So that is everybody voted, please, Claire.
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Right, that has been an incredibly lengthy presentation and debate on that application. So thank you everybody for your patience. And Sarah, can you confirm when Mr. Gordon and Mr. Middleton have left?
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm both have left.
Thank you very much. Okay, in that case, we can now move on to application R20 and R20/0543, which is regarding 71 Temple Street, Rugby, and its change of use of an existing building from a storage facility to provide office space, and including a first floor side extension. And the officer to present is Chris Bates. So let's hope Chris doesn't have any problems sharing screen and the presentation. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Can you see my presentation?
Yeah, that's fine. I've got it on my screen.
Okay. Evening all. This application, R20/0543 at 71 Temple Street Rugby, seeks full planning permission for the change of use of the existing building from a storage facility to provide office space, which is to include increased roof height, first floor side extension, and various external alterations. This application is being reported as the officer recommendation goes against the local policy. Regards to the proposals, it's for a change use of a building from a storage facility to incorporate office space at first floor level with storage space retained on the ground floor. The applicant is an interior fit-out contractor specialising in ceiling and partition systems and operates nationwide, of whom are looking to establish an operation space in Rugby. A maximum of 3 staff would be based at site at any one time. It seeks to extend the existing building by circa 0.7 metres, provide a side extension at first floor level of a cantilever design over the existing right-of-way, leaving a headroom clearance of 2.7 metres, as well as various external alterations which intend to emphasise the commercial storage nature of the building by utilising an industrial character to the extension and simple fenestration treatment to the existing building. Existing street parking arrangements will be used where required. Here is the building on the right hand side as viewed from Temple Street. As you can see, the application site is a former coach house in nature. Its distinctive features are its loading door at first floor level and its general simplistic nature. A shop frontage of sorts can be made out of ground floor level. A right-of-way access for garages serving the properties along Hamilton Road separates the coach house from number 69 at Temple Street on the left-hand side. Here's the view to the rear of the building. Here you can see the garages to the rear, serving those from Hamilton Road on the left-hand side, with number 69 Temple Street on the opposite side of the right of access, and the building to the rear. In regards to the existing plans, the building encompasses a floor space of circa 120 square metres, measuring a width of 5.3 metres and a depth of 13.3 metres, with an eaves height of 4.5 metres and a ridge height of 6.4 metres. Regards to the proposed plans, an original scheme was submitted. However, this was resisted by the officer due to the level of external alterations proposed, which clearly detracted from its existing appearance and its context within the conservation area. Also, by reducing the glazing and the external decking on the side extension, this alleviated any concerns regards to properties across the road from Temple Street and any overlooking concerns. The amended plans incorporate a much simplistic design which respects the character's building through the reusing of the loading doors at first floor level. The external decking area for the side extension has also been reduced by approximately 9.9 metres and now falls well within the rear of the existing building. And as reiterated, the existing building, besides an increase in roof height, is to undergo very little change. The existing windows on the southern elevation are to be lifted to coincide with the height change, coupled with roof lights in the roof side. The side extension is to be incorporated from dark timber and as previously stated, we'll use a cantilever design with a head clearance of approximately 2.7 metres. The extension builds off the existing building with a gap left between number 69 Temple Street. The size of the side extension will remain subservient in context to the existing building, as its overall height and depth will fall within the existing parameters. As previously stated, this extension will provide the additional floor space sought after and will be presented with a high quality contemporary nature, emphasising its industrial character. Regards to the floor plans, the combined ground and first floor would generate a total floor space of 152 square metres, which is an approximate increase of 32 square metres. This will keep storage at the ground floor level and office at the first floor. Here is a theme board, and it shows the examples of the proposed style the applicant is sought after. So here we have the dark timber for the side extension, and this is a contrast to the red brick of the existing building. A dark zinc roofing is proposed, which is for the roofing, which is to be an improvement on the corrugated sheet profiling, and also critical metal frames to be used for the new doors and windows, which is to emphasise the industrial nature of the building. Key issues. Regards to principal development, the application site is within the Rugby urban area, however, it's outside the town centre. Whilst this is a sustainable location for development, it does incorporate a town centre use office space outside of the town centre. Policy TC2 states national guidance requires local planning authorities to apply this sequential approach to plan applications for main town centre uses that are not in the existing centre and not in accordance with the local plan. There is an argument to suggest that there is no requirement to produce a sequential test due to the reusing of an existing building and its small nature. In addition to this, the agent has said that if a sequential test was to be produced, it is more likely to fail its testing because evidently there will be empty office spaces in the town centre. Nevertheless, without sequential test, the proposal falls short of the requirements set out in both local and national policy, where justification for locating the proposal outside the centre cannot be properly assessed. The above therefore carries weight against the proposals, and there are no exceptional circumstances which can prove otherwise. Character design and impact on the conservation area. Of note, the site falls along the northern boundary of the conservation area, with the access road the most northern point. As previously stated, the scheme seeks to increase the building height along with various external alterations and introduce a side extension at first floor level over the access road. Following receipt of the amended plans, which retains the mainstay of existing characteristics, the scheme is considered acceptable. This also considers the nature of the site extension, which due to its subservient nature, whereby it is concealed from the street scene and whereby it is also of a high quality contemporary nature. Approval is subject to submission of materials and further window details. Of note, it utilises an existing building and puts it into a viable use consistent with the conservation in line with paragraph 192 criterion A of the NPPF. The proposal therefore accords with policies SDC 1, SDC 3 of the local plan and the NPPF, where it does not detract from the wider conservation area nor the street scene, thus carrying away the proposals. Impact on the immediate neighbouring properties. In total, there have been 3 objection representations received, one of which was received yesterday evening, which raises similar points to those on the agenda. The reduction in the first floor level glazing and the depth of the decking relaxes any potential overlooking issues towards properties opposite along Temple Street, whereby there is an approximate 12 to 13 metre separation distance between the residential gardens and 16 metres to the nearest windows, albeit these are a 45-degree angle and are considered an opaque angle. Increasing roof height of the original building and the site extension do not present any overshadowing or overbearing concerns. An objection was received by number 51 at Hillwatton Road, which adjoins the site to the south regarding privacy issues. However, as the site is approximately 36 to 37 metres away from the nearest windows, this objection carries very little weight. Other concerns were raised regarding lack of parking and access for emergency vehicles below the site extension. However, these all have been dismissed following constitutive responses, which we'll discuss later. As no plant and machinery are proposed, no assessments required. Based on the above, the proposal is substantially complies with policy SDC 1 of the local plan. Moving on to highway safety and parking facilities, Watch County Council Highways Authority have no objection to proposals as the development is situated in a sustainable area with public transport available. The development is within a highly accessible area with traffic regulation orders restricting illegal parking. There will not be a significant increase in vehicle movements to make the proposed development detrimental to the join of the highway. As I stated, there is only to be 3 full-time staff. Cycle storage is provided in the existing building. Watch County Council Fire and Rescue were consulted and raised no objection to the site extension, as the rear of the site will still be accessible for fire service personnel on foot. The proposals on this basis therefore comply with policy D2 and Appendix 5 of the RBC local plan. Other key issues, impacts on protected species, following submission of updated ecology report, Warwickshire County Council ecology are content with its findings and have no objection subject to various informatives. Air quality, mitigations were included in the design expectation statement, which include increased performance of the building envelope, and the use of electric powered heating hot water, and the installation of an ultra low emission boiler, as well as securing cycle parking for staff within the storage area. Subject to these matters being installed, the application is considered to be in accordance with policy HS5 of the local plan. Moving on to planning balance and recommendation. In regards to the planning balance, whilst the proposals seek to utilise a building which incorporates town centre use office space outside the town centre, whilst considered somewhat excessive given the size of the building and its tenure renewal, with no sequential test as stated to prove otherwise, this offers weight against the proposal. On the other hand, it does aim to bring back to life a dilapidated building which respects the character of the building and the conservation area, whilst providing employment and investment into Rugby Borough, which offers weight for the proposals. In addition, there are no adverse impacts on the amenities of the neighbouring properties, no impact on the protected species, whilst there is no detrimental impact on the highway safety and the parking facilities. And also, the development is considered air quality neutral, all of which offer further weight to the proposals. Based on the presentation and report, officer recommendation is for approval subject to the appropriate conditions and informatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. That was very clear and very concise. Can I ask, you mentioned that one of the things that might go against this particular application is the fact that a sequential test would say that there is office space available in the town. Do we know whether the the company wishing to take on this project actually looked at available office space nearer the town centre?
We don't have any data on that or any research. I think the answer would be no. Primarily, obviously, they looked at this building as a bit of a niche project because it's quite nice in its nature and characteristics, and actually that's why they want to renovate it. So I believe they haven't taken it under any sequential testing, and therefore they haven't looked into any alternative office spaces.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Brown. You need to unmute, Councillor Mrs Brown.
So sorry, honestly, it's so temperamental, this thing. It's a question about the business case, really, that the business owner wants to put forward for this. Do we know if there's a business case for choosing this particular site over and above town, or is it just a cosmetic thing, or they felt that it was a building that could be nicely developed, or is there something business critical in it for them?
I think it's the last point you put on. I think it's, and obviously from the chair, I think it's a site that they obviously wanted. So, regards to a business model, I don't think there's any fundamental reasoning behind anything other than obviously wanting this design, and they felt it was a suitable space, really. There's no really.
Sorry, it's just I wondered if it was perhaps the cost of office space versus developing something that perhaps matched their business image more, and it was it's a business case.
I'm not. I think it's really because obviously by doing the alterations to this building, it's going to be quite an expensive fit out. So I think that's there. Obviously, that's priority, because if you were going to move into an office space in the town centre, whilst the rent might be higher, obviously they wouldn't be doing much alterations to it. So I think it is a business model to obviously to fit there. I think their company profile is going to match what's going on.
Okay. Chris, can I just clarify as well that this would remain as office space, that there's no way that this could be converted into housing, residential?
I mean, we could restrict it by condition. There is no, obviously, there is Temple Street and Hill Morton is purely residential. There is no, well, to my knowledge, there is no other commercial in the vicinity. And it has always been commercial. It's obviously been empty for quite a while, so yeah, we could condition it if you wanted to, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, who has hands up? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. Oops. Yeah, I know this property quite well. It's a strange little building. It doesn't look quite as big in that as it looks on the pictures in reality. It could only potentially be used for storage or office space. It would struggle to be a residential development, so I would welcome the additional condition Chris has just suggested. There was also another sensible condition that I think, one of the concerns of local residents is, can they get down that alleyway to get to their garages? Because you're all aware of the problem at the other end of that alleyway, which we are dealing with enforcement activity on. My other concern was there was a recommendation from ecology that we should look to see whether we could make nesting spaces up into the eaves. And I think that's a really nice suggestion, because it would be a good locality for swallows, swifts, house martins, and those species, and perhaps bats if there's space under the eaves. So, Chris, can you look to put that in there as well?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Right. Okay. If we've got no more questions, then we move into debate. Stunned silence. Councillor Cranham.
Thank you, Chair. It is a strange little building, this, but it's in a poor state of repair and will only get worse. This gives it an opportunity to add some sort of improvement to the local area. It did concern me that perhaps somebody might in future think of turning it into a residential property, but we must concern ourselves with what's before us today. If it wants to be altered, it would have to come before us again. So based on the fact that it's bringing a derelict building back into operation and it's provided jobs, I shall recommend approval.
Thank you very much. Councillor Garcia?
Well, he's taken the words right out of my mouth, and so I'll be happy to second that.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Gillius?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think everything's been said. The only thing is that it does tend to remind me very much of the old style mills you used to have in the Fen country. You know, it's that sort of a dark design. It's very, very well appropriate, I think. The only thing is, I would like to think that whoever's doing the alteration work will employ a builder that knows how to mix the correct quality of mortar and get the right brick so that the increase of that gable, you know, looks right from the street. And I've been driving past that particular building for the best part of 30 years, and it hasn't changed a bit in that time. So it wants sorting.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I think it was a coach house. That's what it's called. So it was obviously a coach house for the bigger houses on Hill Morton Road. Councillor Sanderson, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, happy to support the recommendation, subject to the 2 amendments Chris has suggested.
Okay, thank you. Sarah?
Yes, just to clarify, Chair, in relation to Councillor Sanderson's second point around ecology, the draft decision notice already includes those relevant informatives, and I don't think there's a case to uplift them to conditions, but those informatives are already in there, Councillor Sanderson. But the removal of PD rights is not, so the recommendation should be subject to the inclusion of a condition to remove PD rights.
Okay. Thank you. Ian, Councillor Picker?
Only to say that if a formal motion needs to be moved that we adopt the conditions as suggested, I'm happy to either propose or second that. Okay, thank you very much. Right, I think everybody's had their say, so I think we move into a vote. Approval proposed by Councillor Cranham, seconded by Councillor Garcia, subject to the conditions. So all those in favour, please show. How are we doing? Right, Claire?
So that's 10-4, Chair.
Okay, hands down then. And do we have any against? I know Councillor Barbara Brown, you're having problems. Oh, it's gone down. Right. Any against? No. Any abstentions? So somebody didn't vote. Okay, but anyway, that is a majority and therefore that one is approved. Thank you. Right, we now move on to agenda item number 5, advance notice of site visits for planning applications. Do we have any?
No, we don't, Chair.
Okay. Agenda item 6, planning appeals update.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Obviously, Appendix A is to note, which is the number of planning appeals that have been determined between the 1st of July and the 30th of September. Appendix B are those currently outstanding as of the 30th of September. However, we have had 3 decisions since the agenda was produced. They relate to the 2 appeals at Fieldhouse Farm at Broadwell. Both those appeals were dismissed as the inspector felt that the agricultural buildings weren't of a standard of construction that would be able to be converted to dwellings without substantial rebuild. And we also have had a dismissed appeal at 5 Smeaton Lane, Stretton-under-Foss, on the basis of the impact on the Greenbelt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 7, delegated decisions.
That's just for members to note.
Noted. Thank you very much. Okay. Are there any other issues that we need to deal with? Claire, have I missed anything?
No, Chair, we probably should just take a formal vote on the planning appeals update.
All right then, so can I have hands in the air for the planning appeals update? We got everybody?
That's 10, Chair.
All right, so we've lost one somewhere. Is that
Councillor Butlin?
No, it's Councillor Roodhouse who hasn't.
Oh, there we are. It's unanimous, Chair.
It's unanimous, right? Wonderful. Thank you very much. Right, can I say thank you to officers and committee members for their contributions this evening, and to the members of the public who've been watching. I hope you found that informative and that you realise that every application is really given a good cross-examination and investigation before committee are prepared to make a decision. So thank you for your attendance and good evening. You may stop streaming now. So Wendy from IT, can you confirm when you've stopped streaming? Don't appear to be getting an answer from IT. Claire and Sarah, could you find out what's happening?
Yes, no problem, Chair.